Welcome to Conversations with LSN Tap, where we meet interesting people and hear how they are increasing access to justice through technology. Here's your host, Shelley Reed.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. In this episode, we'll be talking about how AI-powered tools can help legal professionals reduce administrative burden and focus more time on clients and impact. I'm excited to be joined by the founders of Lua Legal, an AI-powered note-taking and workflow tool designed specifically for legal professionals. Lua Legal is tackling a challenge many of us know well: how to capture, organize, and follow up on critical information from client meetings while maintaining confidentiality, accuracy, and trust. Today, we'll explore their origin story, the problem they're trying to solve, and what tools like this could mean for legal aid organizations, nonprofits, and small or resource-constrained legal teams. To get us started, could each of you share a little bit about yourself? And I'm being remiss here. I didn't even introduce you. So before we have you introduce yourself a little bit, I want to introduce you to our audience. Cliff Pluimer is here and Varun Aggarwal is here. So let's start with Cliff. Will you share a little bit about yourself, your background, your career path, and your current role at Lua Legal?
Yeah, my name is Cliff Pluimer. I am the CEO of Lua Legal. Prior to starting the company, I was at HLS where I actually met Varun our 1L year. We were in the same section. Before that, I worked a couple years at McKinsey. It was a great opportunity, but it just felt like empty work at the end of the day. So moving on from that, like just being able to improve processes pretty consistently. Prior to McKinsey, I was an industrial engineer. I worked in aerospace across a variety of different commercial programs. So background is essentially a lot of process improvement, which flows pretty nicely into law school. But I'll hand it over to Varun now.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm Varun. I'm the COO at Lua Legal. Like Cliff mentioned, we met in law school. Before law school, I was actually an engineer, spent a bit of time at Amazon. I was also pursuing a master's degree in computer science with a focus on data privacy and data security. One of my mentors in grad school was Peter Swire. He was President Obama's privacy counselor and also wrote HIPAA. And he kind of forcefully diverted me from my previous path in engineering onto the privacy rails. Very much a great guy, but also a character. And so that kind of got me interested in privacy law in law school, which led to Lua and meeting Cliff.
Awesome. And you Cliff kind of underplayed that the HLS stands for Harvard Law School for those of you that might not be in the know. So I'd also love to hear a little bit about each of your individual experiences and what shaped the way you think about technology and legal practice and ultimately led you to work in this space. I think, Varun, you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but do either of you have anything else you want to share?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, my family relied pretty heavily on legal aid for a variety of evictions. I was in foster care for a bit. So that was kind of the impetus of me getting into law school so I could try to give back. But my engineering side path and through consulting and working in aerospace and with tech companies kind of taught me like the value and almost like the gut instinct to try to improve anything that I see pretty consistently. When I got to law school, I was working in the housing clinic, and that was kind of the first experience I had where it's like there's just so much work to do. Like the admin work, I'm trying to balance 80 cases at a time when you just are understaffed and there's so many people that need help. Like I just felt that reflected of when my parents were trying to find help. Like they just wanted to get someone to listen to them, even if they couldn't get their case all the way through. And that was the kind of the impetus to get started with Lua Legal. And of course, talking to Varun and a lot of the smart folks that are on our team and just knowing that they had the technical experience was fantastic. So it felt like almost my entire path kind of led up to a moment where it felt like there was the moment of AI, the moment of being able to try to push like older institutions to try to like really adopt to help folks. And I had just an amazing team of folks that I met over the last couple of years that was the perfect combination of legal and technical and everything.
Yeah, I think for me, there was some level of disillusionment where I came to law school specifically because coming from Amazon as a data engineer, I was very much on the bad side of data privacy. And that wasn't what I had learned or trained for in my, like education. And so I came to law school with the goal of protecting people from big companies like Amazon. And then when I got to law school, there was kind of moment where I realized that the legal community is largely just so far behind in, basic tech tools that everyone else is using that I almost don't even need to protect lawyers from the Amazons of the world because they're not even using those products. And there just aren't high quality tools being made for lawyers. Legal tech notoriously is not like a sexy industry to work in for engineers. And that means you don't get the best cutting edge stuff. And as a law student who was, working clinics, I wanted the best cutting edge stuff for myself as well. So that kind of informed a lot of the design choices and just the path of the company.
Really interesting. And in the legal tech world, there's also the silo of legal aid, legal tech, which is even, getting sometimes the um, even further down the food chain of advances. So I believe that you call yourself co-founders of Lua Legal, but was there someone else involved in helping get the company off the ground?
Yeah, so we have two other co-founders, James and Rohith. So Rohith is our CTO. I knew him both undergrad and grad school. We take a lot of the same classes, took a lot of the same data privacy kind of path through. But then he specialized in machine learning engineering when we were master students. And so I knew he was kind of the perfect person to bring on as we were starting to scale up from just law school clinics to a lot of private organizations. James is actually one of Cliff's coworkers at one of his summer associate jobs, who James worked at Google for about 5 years, and just has amazing ideas. He's our chief product officer and kind of like is the one who's always coming up with like new features, new ways to help people, all of that kind of stuff.
And also graduate from Duke Law, Barden, New York. He's a absolute weapon.
That's awesome. So I think we've heard a little bit of what inspired you to start Lua Legal, but was there a specific moment, even more frustration or experience that made the need for this tool especially clear to you?
Yes. When I was doing intake for Housing Clinic, obviously the backlog of phone, like us being able to answer phones and talk to people, was about like a 10% answer rate. And there was one interview I was having where the guy was in a panic because he just got like a notice to quit. He wasn't sure exactly how to file the answer. He wasn't sure how to get through everything. So while he was talking to me, it was like an hour-long conversation, but he was racing. Every word he was saying, I was trying to write down as much as I could. And of course, it's difficult to get in contact with clients once you get off the phone for that 1 hour of information. And during that, I'm like, he's moving so fast. He's in such an emotional spot. Like, I'm not getting the information I need to be able to help him as much. He's got to go back to work soon. I don't know if I can get a hold of him. I've got 10 other people I have to call today. And at that point, I was just like, I want to be in the moment with him. He's obviously emotional, and I obviously can't be writing as fast as a stenographer here. And at that point, I was just thinking, like, there's got to be a better way. Like, if lawyers are taking consistent notes, if we're consistently trying to do admin work and stay on top of the analytics of the process of getting people in, collecting information, and just trying to help them, the old way of doing things is not feasible. That semester, I was also taking a CS class, kind of as like a side excuse. So I started getting a bit more involved in the technical stuff, more on software engineering as opposed to process engineering. And like consistently, I just proved to myself like this is something that can happen. Like all you need to do is be very cognizant of how you're handling data and privilege. And these are all tough technical solutions, but solvable ones. And of course, then at that point, I reached out to the two best engineers that I knew, Varun and James, to see if they could help me solve it. Talk to the clinic professors and the supervisors, and across the board, it was such a weird experience because it was such an obvious idea. Like if we can do this securely and safely, why don't we implement this as fast as possible? Um, and at that point, like I think Varun, you and I kind of started thinking like, oh wow, maybe there is something here inside of the market. Just because like, yeah, we make the most notes. Why not have a note taker that helps you automate your workflow in the first 20%, 30% of your case, and then support you through the end of litigation or settlement, anything.
So that response, I think, would counter many of the objections that attorneys have, except for public personal information, protecting client information. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But that's a beautiful response of you saw the need, you had a solution, or you dreamed of a solution, and then you went out and started building. So how did you go about building the company? You had the idea, what were your first steps and anything that you had to do to overcome the risk averse nature of law?
Yeah, so the very first step was kind of, building out our whole MVP, and then getting it just like very thoroughly vetted by as many privacy experts as we could. The legal field is one of those places where a lot of startups just they build a product that works and they get it out to lawyers. And sometimes there's almost some level of conning lawyers into using it because the security comes after the fact. And obviously, that's not where we wanted to come from. But that meant that we had to have enterprise level security as a team of people who were working part-time at the time. So we built out all of this extremely robust security. We looped in some friends who worked in, professional grade security full time, talked to consultants about it, like from our previous lives. Looped in some people from the IAPP, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, which is the org that like writes like HIPAA and GDPR and all of those kind of privacy legislations, and spent just as much time as we could making sure that every single nut and bolt in the project was completely secure. And then we took it to as many people as we knew who had kind of big networks in the legal community. So some of those people included like Martha Minow, who was a former dean of HLS, John Palfrey, who's the current president of the MacArthur Foundation, who was also one of my professors, and kind of having them review it to make sure that it was ready to go out into the hands of lawyers, and pre-vet everything. And then after that, we were able to kind of use those connections to get a handful of very tech-savvy lawyers looking at the product, refining it, giving us criticism. And then we started offering it to clinics for free, just to get users using it, and to get as many reps as we could. And it kind of snowballed from there. And once we had users actually hands-on with the product, and kind of just like, giving us consistent feedback, helping it grow, at that point, it actually became much more easy to figure out, okay, like these aren't opinions anymore. These are the actual product direction that users actually want. And it snowballed from there until the point where we were just getting inbounds from private firms and didn't even need to be doing outreach for them.
That's really awesome that you approach the objections before they've been made. I really like that.
I will
So
say
what are
working with clinics and legal aid specifically was very helpful because I do think that specific niche of legal tech is farther ahead in terms of preparing for the bad outcomes when it comes to adopting technology too quickly. So everyone we talked to was very supportive and helpful with just thinking through the process of translating these helpful technologies into safe and usable ones.
That's awesome. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced so far, either technically, culturally, or just within the legal ecosystem?
I can speak a bit. I mean, this is like a mixture of like a market challenge and a culture challenge. Our team is very obviously like tech savvy. We love testing new tools that come out, all the most recent models. So the external market pressure for tech is extraordinarily high. Like there are some amazing things that frontier models are doing now that just haven't trickled into legal tech. So coming into a market where the internal pressure for adopting new technology is lower, there's a bit of like a translation piece, both on like the technical side, where we're excited and we want to get as many new features out as possible, just so folks can see the power of these things. But being able to go through and vet it, so building up the diligence process, getting these exciting technologies, and having just to slow ourselves down on the product roadmap has just been like a cultural challenge. But because of all these tools being external to the market, folks know about them. They just have a distrust for AI and legal tech. So there's a bit of a market challenge there of just the education aspect of it and kind of building the trust, which is why we've gone about doing like white papers and CLE talks, free trials, just so folks can use it personally and get to a sense of how it works first. And just learning what the pain points are of why folks don't want to take a risk on a new technology, and just making sure that we make it as simple as possible. So not only can the lawyer understand it, they can explain it to their client when they need to get the consent for it too, in simple terms, so everyone has as much knowledge as they need to use them properly.
And then kind of on the internal market side there, there right now, legal tech is in such a huge AI bubble, right? Where a ton of legal tech companies are, every single quarter they are created, they get like three or four customers and they die the next year. And every single big legal tech company that's more of a, the household names, they're ramming AI into every single product they have, and it's not super well thought out and it's not super secure. And so AI is almost becoming like a bad word in the legal market, right? And so coming from backgrounds where we've been building these AI tools that are, like professional grade security and kind of for the same design principles as the Amazons and the McKinseys of the world, there are a lot of like educational opportunities we've had to take to kind of like help reverse the yes, legal tech AI has not been great and you've been burned a lot by vendors, but that doesn't mean that it's like a tech problem. That's a problem with, like the market. And so kind of helping people separate those out in their minds through a bunch of CLEs and webinars and interviews like this.
That's true. Yeah, all of that. So, so I actually am working on a training opportunity this year, and want to like the future of what law, the technology law will use in the future, and then at the halfway through, is like, oh, you think that was great? Well, it's already here, and just share that, just to educate. Lawyers that these technologies that sound beautiful are actually here and available. We just haven't taken advantage of them yet.
I do
So,
remember back in consulting, I would make a bunch of like very high level materials to explain complicated technology to like C-suite executives. And I remember like back in the day saying like these technologies are like 10 years out, and then 2 years later, lo and behold, they're already here, and everyone's scrambling to figure out how do we rush our timeline up. Yeah.
interesting. So I know we heard your story a little bit, Cliff, on your experience, but I would love to hear from your perspective, both of you, what is broken or inefficient about how meeting notes, follow-ups, and internal documentation is typically handled in legal practice today.
Yeah, I think Cliff kind of covered, part of this and part of the frustration that we've both felt when we've done the clinical work in his previous answer. But right now, you kind of have two options on almost any high volume meeting kind of job, right? Is either you are extremely attentive and you are in the moment, focused on the conversation, and then you record the meeting and you transcribe it or take notes later, or you just remember everything you can. Or you're splitting focus between taking notes and recording everything and making notes to yourself to like do XYZ follow up and pull these documents and start this research. And you're inevitably going to miss parts of a meeting and you're not going to be able to give both the like mental focus, but also the like emotional focus that you need for a lot of high impact cases. Um, and so, there's a reason that even in less sensitive and less important fields than the law, every single business professional in the world outside of legal, medical, and financial uses some sort of automated record-taking system across their entire organization so that that can help them with coordinating. It can smooth out those inefficient edges. We, unfortunately, in these extremely verticalized industries, haven't been able to have those tools up until recently, but now we can. And so smoothing out those kind of inefficiencies where just because we're humans and we're good at doing one thing at a time really well, and we're not good at doing 15 different things and then coordinating with other people who are doing the same thing as us at the same time. That's a job that's just not, good for us. And it's great for tech.
That's really kind of very insightful, and we forget that we're not good at doing more than one thing at a time. Um, so, using AI, I'm sure you've come across lots of myths and misconceptions that people have. So, I'd love to hear some of the things that you have encountered, and especially if you can address things about accuracy, confidentiality, and attorney judgment as related to AI tools.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest misconceptions, I guess there's two of them that we saw coming into legal tech. It's almost like bimodal in terms of your willingness to adopt technology. There's a group of attorneys who think that because they have a standard enterprise agreement or they toggled like don't save my data in ChatGPT, they can store a bunch of their privileged information electronically. Then on the other side, there's a group of folks that think that absolutely no PII ever into LLMs and there's no solution around that. For that first folks, right? The generic technologies out there currently, they're just not built for lawyers. So, for example, if you have like a generic note taker, it could generate privileged documents and send them out to anyone that was on the meeting. And then all of a sudden, you have documentation that exists in a cloud server, on email servers everywhere, both on your firm and maybe in a opposing counsel's law firm. And that's not good. So that first misconception is you just can't be using things blatantly and openly. Like you do have to put diligence into that. And that's a little bit of the education of, okay, here are the 3 or 4 questions you ask the vendors. Like these are the checklist of what you need to get done. On the other side, it's the no PII into LLMs. And that is where we start getting into the accuracy issues and all the other like workflow issues. Is there are ways to make sure that your data is only existing with your law firm currently, and you're still able to put confidential information into these models. It's just tough, right? But if you take a hardline stance there, then you're not going to be able to adopt the technologies that actually increase accuracy in the future. An example here would be like OCR versus ADE. That's like if you want to scan documents, put them into a digital format so you can search them. With OCR, it doesn't use AI, so you would have to use that if you don't want to use PII into an LLM. But that technology is not going to be supported anymore because ADE is now an LLM-backed version of that that is significantly more accurate and allows you to process information a lot faster. But that forces you to put PII in order to get the benefits of these new tools. So the misconception that we're seeing is like I can use every tool right now, anything on the cutting edge I'm allowed to use, and then I'm not allowed to use any new tool because I've like hamstrung myself thinking that we're not allowed to put our stuff in there. So we have a very middle of the way stance. Like you can use these tools only after they've been vetted and only after that you have been like educated enough to know that like your data is safe. But that just to a word spot of like there's folks on one side that could be getting sued, and there's folks on the other side that they're not happy with these tools because they're not true AI tools, and the accuracy is dipping, even though the models are getting better because it's old technology they just don't trust.
Interesting. And, that one kind of hit in the heart because I was at the Women in AI Summit this past weekend, and one of the presenters pointed out that if you are not utilizing a tool fully, are you really getting the full benefits out of it? So that was a challenge I came home with, was to look at the tools that I am using. And if I trust them enough to use them, why not trust them for everything? So that's a challenge that I'm working with, and I'm sure that our listeners also are dealing with those same challenges. So
It puts you
let's
in a weird position where instead of solving the problem that you're trying to make, you've all of a sudden just created a bunch of overhead to try to figure out how to solve the problem. And you realize the tech isn't exactly where you want it. So you start from point A. And that's the exact
Mhm.
problem that we're trying to solve is like we put the diligence in, we're willing to walk you through and be as transparent about it so you feel comfortable with it, just so you can get base hits and adopt quick technology so you can start to learn and get comfortable with it.
Well, so let's start digging in. So for listeners who are new to Lua Legal, how does it work? What are the key benefits for legal professionals?
Yeah, so kind of the core of Lua Legal is that it started off as an AI note taker. So for those who are unfamiliar, basically it gives you a summary, a transcript, and action items for all of your meetings. And that's whether it's on Zoom or Teams, whether it's a phone call, or even in-person meetings, right? And so I can go into my dashboard and I can look through all the meetings I've had this week or this month or whatever else and see what all my action items are, my to-do lists for everything. And kind of I can go through and have a system of record for everything I've done. So if I have a client engagement that lasts for a year and I don't remember what I said to someone who I spoke to 2 months ago, I can just go back in and look at those notes. Then the kind of expansion of Lua was to a live meeting assistant that actually handles some of the admin tasks for you. So when you have Lua on a call, you can actually chat with Lua in the moment and basically ask it questions both about what's happening on that call and about your previous calls. So for example, whenever I'm on a call that's longer than 40, 50 minutes, I'll always ask Lua towards the end, all right, give me a quick recap of all the things we agreed upon. And then I'll run that back for the group just to make sure that everyone has aligned on what our action items are. Because in reality, there's always something where it's like, no, actually, I misunderstood that, and we have to come back and talk about it. And then after the fact, I can always talk to Lua and be like, okay, like draft me this email and send out this calendar invite and fill out this form. And, it'll have some of that stuff done for me already by the time my meeting's over. So basically, it's like having an assistant on every call with you that remembers everything from both that call and previous calls that you can chat with silently in the moment and then instruct to do tasks that are done for you by the time you're off the call.
Awesome. So, was Lua designed for a particular kind of practice, or can it be used across different practices? And what about different organizational sizes?
Yeah, it's designed for everybody, right? So we first built Lua for the clinics in law school, but then Cliff and I both worked at, like big corporate law firms as summer associates as well. And so going from small clinic to biggest law firms in the country kind of spans a pretty big gap. And both of those experiences kind of informed the design choices for Lua. So the idea is that Lua is meant to be the most customizable and easy to use note taker for everybody. So we basically have a ton of customizations that can make it extremely powerful for legal aids, extremely powerful for high volume litigation firms, extremely powerful for boutique transactional firms, or extremely powerful for big law firms. And those needs are all slightly different, but we kind of have support for all of those.
We focused
Uh,
on designing kind of from the bottom up of how can everyone use this correctly? Just like how do we get lawyers to adopt AI properly? And then from there, building out the workflows. So we have users from solo practitioners who don't have the ability to keep the headcount necessary to just run the admin work for them. So they basically have an automation portion there. Like Varun said, mid-sized firms who just want to give all their attorneys and intake staff as much tools as possible to maximize efficiency during a big growth period. And then for large law firms, like let's say you have a partner with 20 associates under them, just being able to track how those cases are going. So just having insights to meetings across the board gives every size law firm just the information they need just to be more efficient and have more time in the day for whatever you want to do, be it draft a motion or go golf or see your family.
so, um, well, I won't be going to the golf course. I'll skip on that one. Um, Many of our listeners work in legal aid organizations. So, how can organizations like legal aid, legal services responsibly harness a tool like Lua Legal to support their staff and their clients?
Yeah, I do want to start by floating our pro bono program. So we don't profit off of nonprofits at all. So if you are a nonprofit organization, we give our note taker to you at cost based on the usage that you have. That doesn't include any cost for integrations or the overhead that we do for maintaining the service. Our institutional investors don't quite like that, but just because of my background, that is just a mission I want to stick with Lua Legal. In terms of adopting tools like AI responsibly, um, I would say starting with understanding the AI policy of your organization, right? We've talked a lot about we believe you can put PII into LLMs. We've solved it in a way that you can, so we can get people a little bit less trustworthy about that. That doesn't mean that your organization's AI policy allows that. Like technically it's feasible, but first and foremost, let's make sure that you're following your own internal policies. And then just in general, I would say focus on the basics. A lot of legal tech right now is trying to get one very difficult workflow that takes several months to get set up. But we're in an iteration period, right? It's about moving quickly, moving safely, but moving quickly to see if these tools work or not. Any free trials you can get, just try to get into the hands of folks across your organization just to see exactly who uses it the best. And then from there, you can start building out like an AI committee or a review board for any outputs. We've worked a lot with mid-sized firms to help them structure that based on more large firms and how they're structuring their AI committees. But bare bones, make sure you're following your own internal policies and then use the tools as quick as possible just to get feedback from as many people as possible.
I'll
Of
also
course.
just add in real quick. So in legal aid, there is kind of historically been a kind of niche market where there are tons of tools that are specifically designed for legal aid organizations, and those companies only sell to legal aid organizations. And that made a lot of sense back when software was largely developed in verticalized buckets. But now, these days, there are a lot of tools out there that are useful for all lawyers, right? And a lot of those companies didn't start off as nonprofit projects, so they're not marketing themselves to legal aids, but that doesn't mean that legal aids can't benefit from them. And so I would recommend looking into the vendors that are very popular or very well regarded in the plaintiff's law space. It's the most analogous space in terms of the technological needs and the technological downsides for most legal aid organizations. And that's where all of the kind of venture money is going into legal tech right now, is high volume litigation firms. So there's a lot of garbage out there, but there are some absolute diamonds that haven't just aren't marketing themselves to legal aid organizations, but are happy to work with legal aid organizations. If you're just looking in a kind of different sector from the traditional conventional legal aid tech stuff.
Love that. I have been waving the flag of, we need other, other types of technology than what has traditionally been marketed in the legal aid space. So thank you so much for helping me beat that drum, because we need to open the doors and get our clients. We can do better for our clients if we're willing to adopt technology. So kind of looking at the bigger picture, what needs to change in the way legal work, especially client interactions and documentation? How do we need to change so that it's handled better if we truly want to benefit from tools like AI?
Yeah, I would say kind of setting up like the entire field just to make sure that it's okay to be experimenting correctly. I mentioned before that we are the most customizable note taker for law firms because AI policies are so like disparate in nature. There's a ton. Um, so no, there is no precedent, there is no consensus on how do you properly use AI for these specific workflows and law. And I think probably one of the biggest things in order to really unlock these technologies would be to come to some sort of a consensus, be it a regulatory body or some institution saying these are the low, medium, high versions of your risk appetite for use of AI.
Mm.
Obviously, any sort of court rulings would be very helpful just to give more direction there. But once we have an idea of what we can and cannot put into these technologies, the last major part, which we talk a lot to our clients about, but we've lost it, like it doesn't seem to be coming to the top of mind outside of legal aid, would be the client consent aspect. All these tools will be putting, if it's a live tool, it's going to be putting this information live into an LLM. The AI policy makes sure that that is a secure process, but then there's the consent aspect to make sure that the clients that you're helping know how you're helping them and they're comfortable with that as well. It's a learning process for AI, and not everyone's on the same page. Just because your firm's adopted doesn't mean that all your clients are willing to adopt it. But I think once we get kind of a standard operating procedure for what information can we use, what types of tech stacks are allowed versus not, that makes vetting a lot easier so you can iterate quickly. And then once you get those consent cycles in place, that's actually where you start to get the information you need from your client in a proper way where you can actually turbocharge your cases and do like all of your document research supplemented with your meeting note research to make sure there's any conflicts. But it really is kind of those two fundamental things of making sure everyone's okay with it first, and then making sure that you're aligned on what goes into the system versus not.
I'll also kind of add in here, as individual attorneys, what you can do is put pressure on your state bar association to give out more specific AI guidance. I know that, we can all wait for a regulatory body to do something, but we all have a voice in our state bars. And so I want to shout out actually the Colorado State Bar and the Illinois State Bar, two of the most forward-thinking state bar associations. We actually have been working with both of them, and they have been really, really good about giving proactive advice and kind of indicating like this is the way that we would rule in like a sanctioning hearing or something, right? If XYZ thing were to happen. Illinois in particular has, I think, extremely clear guidance on how you can vet AI tools and vendors. And we need more state bar associations to be kind of issuing that kind of highly specific advice. We actually do a lot of partnerships with bar associations, and like coming from a big privacy background, I sometimes am involved in helping them kind of craft AI policies, or at least again kind of critiquing them. And so that's something that any attorney who's interested in and wants to help move the profession forward can just reach out to the bar and help. And they're all pretty much always looking for people who want to do that work for them.
Absolutely. There's an education effort for 1.4 million attorneys in the US. So any amount of help just to get folks on the same page is extremely useful.
I think that's really a great suggestion. If you want to make change, sometimes you have to get out there and put some work in. And it's also, a lot of this we've been saying, you've mentioned your AI policies, and there are still organizations that don't have AI policies. So what do practitioners do then? Well, I've always recommended that follow your technology policy, right? Because AI tools are technology. So if you have no AI policy, then fall back on your technology policy, and that'll at least be a place to start. So,
Yeah, especially for any IT policies around the use of confidential data. We have one, I think it's pretty standard for SOC 2 ISO that you basically classify all levels of data in your organization and what access controls you have. That is a very helpful signpost, especially if you don't have an AI policy, just to help you kind of get an understanding of the level of scrutiny that you need to do with certain vendors.
that's awesome. And I appreciate you bringing up that policy because there may be people out there that aren't aware. So that's a great place for people to start.
They're usually hidden in way in the back of a Google Drive somewhere that no one has looked at.
Absolutely. So do you have any other advice that you would give to legal organizations or practitioners who are curious about AI, but still feeling hesitant or overwhelmed? Any additional advice that you might give?
Yeah, I think that a lot of legal tech right now, like Cliff kind of mentioned this earlier, but a lot of legal tech is currently focused on trying to solve huge parts of your practice, and those take months to integrate and even longer to train your staff on. And it's a huge cost, and it's scary. And if it doesn't work, you've wasted all that time and money. So the advice is that's just don't do that, right? You can build up to those later, but right now. The thing that everyone should be focusing on is small base hits, right? You don't need to know how Google works to use Google search, and AI is kind of the same thing. As long as the platform is secure and you know that the big players in legal are using it, just start trying it out in non-client facing, non like less sensitive roles. Basically, there are tons of AI tools that are just kind of like solving small problems you have. And if they don't work, it's not the end of the world. And if they do, you've cut out maybe 30 minutes of every day. And that adds up to a huge value over time, as opposed to trying to replace your entire workflow and restructure your entire system around AI. The other big thing is AI, the number one use case, I think, for non-programmers is that it solves the you don't know what you don't know problem, where Google unlocked the internet for people, right? But if you don't know enough about something to know what the right questions to ask, even Google won't really get you to the right answer. So Google solved the you know what you don't know problem. AI is solving the you don't know what you don't know problem, where now, if I don't know about how an AI tool works, I can just go on to Gemini and ask Gemini, how does this tool work? Or even, how does Gemini work, right? Or what can I use it for? And these tools know more about themselves than any human does. And so if you treat AI as kind of like you don't need to know anything about what you're asking about, and you ask the basic questions to learn what the right questions are and then ask those questions, that's, I think, kind of my recommended way to get started with AI.
Yeah, I refer to my LLM as my best buddy, my the person who I go and ask questions with, when I want to learn more. Um, so that's really fun, a fun way to think about it so thank you. So do you see Lua Legal expanding into other areas?
Staying within the legal field for sure, but in terms of kind of the product vision and how we expand the note taker, we've started expanding it with different specific legal workflows, right? Like across the board, it's helpful just to have all of your notes, not just on paper or in a OneNote or scattered across like your entire office, have them in one spot. Every lawyer can benefit from that. But now it's like, how do we go a step further, right? We've built out legal aid specific workflows so you can help get intakes pushed to legal server in the format that you expect, right? The same thing for just client intakes in general, transactional law. Just how do we go that step further of, okay, you have this information that's helpful. It's in a nice format, but it's not the format that you and your law firm are used to working with. It's not templatized to your letterhead if you want to send out a CYA or a privilege log, right? Those are all things that we've started building on top. Because once you get the information and basically a meeting assistant that can stick with you, then how do we get that into your workflow to make sure it works the best? So that's how we're planning to expand over the next few quarters here, but not really outside of the legal field though.
Makes sense. You pick your space and stay in your lane. So, Varun, a minute ago you mentioned other tools. Are there any easy to access tools that you would recommend that organizations maybe look at for workflows or reducing burnout?
Yeah, I think the super easy answer that I always give to everyone is Notebook LM. It's kind of it's like everything you would want ChatGPT to be, right? So it's very secure. Google is one of the few big companies I actually trust on data privacy. It's backed by Gemini, which just almost across the board is better at most tasks than ChatGPT is. But the big thing with Notebook LM is that it is a much kind of better system for managing files and keeping all of your chats and keeping context where it's not like a new chat every time, and there is a lot of transparency about what data they're collecting and what they aren't. And so just replacing your chatbot, if you're using, like ChatGPT or you're using Claude or something, or if you're not using any AI chatbots at all in your day-to-day life, just setting up a Google LM workspace for you or for your firm, and then keeping all of your AI context there. It'll learn from you as you kind of put more stuff in. It'll learn who you are, what you do, the way you like things. And it's just a huge unlock that's extremely easy to use.
And I would say, for me personally, collaborative features, any sort of collaborative tools, this is getting a little bit less close to client service and more so just the operational aspect. The big thing that we use is Slack. It's just a chat, like a message platform where you can talk to your entire company and get like work teams. I think the useful thing about Slack is it's probably the like dumb easiest way to get integrations with like Google Drive or some more advanced features. So instead of having to go and learn 5 different dashboards, you have it in one spot. Everyone can work with at the same time. It doesn't go as far to be like the best tool for a specific use case, but it's so generalizable and so helpful that just making sure everyone's on the same page and parallel processing complex tasks really, really saves time and honestly just energy because you don't have to like compare notes anymore. You just like reference the chat and say, yep, yep, that's the thing that we talked about. And it's already in linear and Google Drive and everything.
And the really cool thing about
Awesome.
Slack is that, like, everyone's heard of Slack, right? But like, what a lot of people don't realize is that while the UI is like pretty simple and it's made for non-technical professionals, it's really kind of like an engineer's dream where you can integrate any platform onto it. So we have clients who are using Slack who they have their intake platform connected. So every new intake is like a Slack notification in a channel, and it goes to the right person. And then when that person files by the intake, someone else gets notified. And right, it's like the whole chain of, the customer service is everything is tracked in Slack and it handles all that, passing off and coordination. And when you do that, that really just improves operations at any kind of larger enterprise.
I would say if I was going to try to get a lawyer to go from 0 to maybe 80 on AI, I would say start with Slack. Just figure out how you can get your apps to talk to each other, start working with your team, get everyone comfortable, start using Notebook LM so you understand exactly like what you can and can't put into LLMs, how it can be helpful. And then from there, like maybe start working with Zapier in order to start doing more automated workflows just for your firm, right? Because once you stop having to spend 20 minutes filing paperwork in the right folder, then you have more time and then you can start focusing on like maybe the next big project and the next big project. I would definitely not recommend starting from the top down and converting all of your records via OCR into something that's stored in the cloud. That is way too big and it's not a collaborative effort. Not everyone's learning at the same time. It's probably just your IT team. And the point of these new, like the easy to use tools is everyone in your firm can use it. Everyone can start getting a lot more comfortable with using technology. So when you do roll out the bigger projects, you didn't just spend $100,000 on a piece of technology no one's using.
Really great suggestions, and I will link in the podcast notes a training that we have done on using Notebook LM. So if people want to get started, they can start there. So, how do you measure the success or the impact for Lua? Are there signals that tell you that the tool is actually helping people do their work better, or do you have some stories? And then, if you do have stories, was there one that really just confirmed that you're on the right path?
I think Varun talks a lot with our clients, so maybe you can talk more about the stories. I work a lot with the tech team, so we work on like making sure the product is being used and how we improve it. I would say like some of the indicators that really kind of showed us like, oh wow, like people just want something simple but secure, right? was there was a pilot we had. It was 20 people for a month. And then after that first month, we scaled to the entire 120 person law firm. And then we get anonymized usage analytics. So we see that when someone first starts using it, they get a couple notes that first week. But then after 3 weeks, they're getting every note from everything that they can be doing, because the more information you have, and the more features that you can mark as like privilege and review and keep a single document, this the more useful these workflows become. But Varun, I'm sure, like, I can think of Chris and a few other folks who've sent us letters just being like, "This is amazing," but you probably have some better stories.
The handwritten letters are always awesome. I never expected to get handwritten letters, as a software provider, being like, this is so cool. But we've got a couple of those from clients. I think the really one that sticks out to me, though, is one of our enterprise customers, which is like an unnamed Fortune 500 company. They had this kind of, we weren't even marketing to them. I just met one of their privacy attorneys at like a privacy conference. And basically, they were telling us about how they had gone to the Microsoft Teams people who worked in the same building as them in Seattle. And they asked for a bunch of attorney-specific features, and Teams flatly said no because attorneys are such a small and wildly different portion of their users. It doesn't make sense for them to dedicate any engineering time to supporting that. And then I asked her what feature she asked for, and every single feature she had asked for was something that we had already built. And I told her about that, and we had essentially a handshake deal that day. And that kind of, like nothing feels better than knowing that a client went out of their way to go in person asking for something that you'd already built.
I will say it has been a fun experience going to conferences, starting with like, because it's an educational portion of like, what can we do in the fastest way possible? Starting out a little too technical and then getting into a spot where folks can kind of understand the value prop. And I think the one time, or not the one time, but like that's when we started really seeing the traction or like really understanding where we're playing was when folks after hearing us just went, oh, that solves my problem. Like once you hear like solved and they take a pain point off their plate that they're trying to get rid of, then you're like, perfect, fantastic.
That's awesome. So looking ahead, I want to going to combine some two questions here. So, um, what is one question you wish people would ask you in interviews but rarely do? And if you don't have something there, if you have a vision for the future of Lua Legal. So either one of those questions would you like to address?
Just because I'm blanking on the question, usually I like to folks to ask me whether or not my nephew's doing well because I'm a new uncle. Um, as for the future, that I see Varun's cringing there. As for the future, I mean, we have a note taker now, but our workflows are in this position where we see ourselves becoming just the meeting assistant, like basically Jarvis for law, right? The ability to call a voice model and be able to tell it all of your case updates, reschedule everything without actually having to log onto your computer. Really just getting the UX dialed in and just becoming kind of like prolific, almost like a pocket knife or like a Swiss Army knife for a lawyer.
Yeah, Cliff's nephew is really cute, but when the 100th time that you're on a call and Cliff interrupts you to be like, "Hey, look at this picture," it's like, I am working right now. Um, but yeah, I think so. A question that I kind of wish people asked more is just about kind of the more advanced data privacy stuff. For a lot of attorneys, that's not exactly in their wheelhouse, but there are attorneys that specialize in privacy. As a privacy engineer, that's kind of just like that's my bread and butter that I get excited about, right? And so we do CLEs about like what is the bare minimum that a legal tech vendor needs before you can trust them. But we obviously don't do the bare minimum, and we're always creating cool new privacy stuff that I love to talk about. For the looking ahead part of it, the Jarvis for law kind of idea, where it's like it is your assistant that's just there with you all the time. So one of the big kind of things that we're working on that's currently working in beta is the ability to just text Lua from your phone, or literally, or even call Lua, right? Where you just like on the phone, hey Lua, like give me this update, or like like what is Cliff up to right now, or stuff like that, turning Lua from kind of like a meeting assistant just in meetings to the meeting assistant that you actually use as your PA all the time.
That's awesome. So I will turn that question since I heard that. Will you come and do a CLE for us on privacy and information. That would be something that we'll have to talk about in the future.
Yeah, I think we'd love to.
That would be great. So how can people learn more about Lua Legal and or support your work?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can just go to our website at lualegal.ai. That is lualegal.ai. We have a lot of FAQs, resources on the website, so you can start to learn. I would definitely recommend attorneys dive into our legal resources page so they can read our terms of service, our privacy policy. We have a white paper on how we're compliant with the ABA model rules, and all sorts of fun stuff. Anyone can sign up for a free trial today. If you're technically savvy, it takes you 5 minutes. If you've never used an LLM, it'll take you maybe 20. It's super simple. You can start using it today. And just like Varun said, base hits, just tinker with it a little bit, upload non-privileged audio files if you're not comfortable with that just yet. See how the notes come out. Mess around with the workflows a bit and see if it helps you out.
That's awesome. Well, wrapping up here, a question that I ask all of our guests, what is one favorite app, tool, or tech tip that you're loving right now, or something simple that makes your workday better?
I said it before, I'll say it again, Slack. I was an anti-adopter for the longest time when our CTO was trying to get us to use it, but now that I'm using it, I live in that app.
Yeah, we have an Notebook LM already, but I think for the tech tip, probably just uh, it's not nearly as hard as it sounds to stay up to date with what's happening in the tech and the AI space. You don't need to be consuming the fire hose on a daily basis. But like once a month, just take a minute to just kind of like maybe even just ask an LLM, like, what has happened I need to know about in the last month in the AI space? Tell me about three tools that might be useful to me, right? And if those are interesting, look at them, and if they're not, don't. But also, the big thing about tech adoption is find a few people that you think are in your firm are like very kind of forward thinking about AI tools and empower them to spend some of their time on the clock looking into these tools. Firms that do that just tend to have a much better time with tech integration than firms that are playing catch up and trying to figure out what tools are the best from what other people are using.
Yeah, on that point, we just see that obviously the folks that should be running tech are the folks that know it and love tech. But they might not always be the legal tech overlap in law firms doesn't always exist. And likely they are attorneys doing legal work. So giving them the space to kind of follow their passion, to kind of do the vetting on your behalf, it's a lot better for someone who knows a thing to come and tell you and walk you through the software, as opposed to you just try to learn it from the beginning.
Awesome. Well, and also if someone shows you how to use it properly, you don't have to unlearn bad habits,
Exactly.
or find out that you could have been doing lots of other things, So yes, I'm a firm believer in training and learning how software was designed to use, and then you can always tweak it so how you want to use it. But learning how all the features is always a great start. Well, Varun and Cliff, thank you so much for joining us today. Lots of really great tips and things beyond talking about Lua. So I'm hoping that people will take away several things from today's session and reach out and find out how Lua can help them in their work. So thank you for joining us, audience, and we'll see you next time.